I didn't lose my mind when I read the email. I didn't scream, slam my fist into the wall, or make a scene in the barracks. I just stared at the screen, then read it again. Slowly. Word by word. Like it might change if I gave it time. My name is Michael Hudson. I'm 45 years old. I serve in the United States Air Force. At the time, I was deployed overseas at Ramstein Air Base in Germany. I've been active duty for more than 2 decades, and by now, I've seen just about every version of human behavior a person can encounter. What I hadn't seen, or expected, was the woman I married walking out of my life without so much as a phone call. Melissa and I had been together for 22 years. No kids. We lived in a quiet suburb near Orlando, Florida. She worked in healthcare management. I moved base to base every few years, but Florida was always home. She stayed back, holding the fort, handling the mortgage, the mail, the garden, and everything in between. We built a life that felt solid, predictable, grounded. Until it wasn't. I woke up at 5 o'clock that morning, same as always. Went for a run around the perimeter, same routine I've followed for years. I like predictability. I like systems. I like order. Afterward, I grabbed some powdered coffee from the mess, came back to my bunk, and opened my laptop to check messages before briefing. There it was. An email from Melissa. The subject line: "Please read before you call me." No greeting. No emotion. Just a message that changed everything. "Mike, I've moved out. I've filed the paperwork. The joint accounts are closed. I've taken what I need to restart. Please don't try to reach me. It's done." I reread it twice, thinking maybe I'd misunderstood. Maybe this was part of some joke, some misplaced email. But the details were too precise. The timing too clean. I checked our shared bank account, zeroed out. I tried the house camera feed, offline. I logged into our storage unit account, access code changed. This wasn't a rash decision. This was planned. Carefully. She had waited until I was halfway across the world, buried in schedules and satellite briefings, and then pulled the plug on our marriage like it was a business transaction. A part of me wanted to ask, why? But I didn't. Because the more I sat with it, the more I realized the signs had been there. She had become distant months ago. Phone calls turned shorter. Texts lost their warmth. The woman who used to send me photos of her morning coffee or a funny bumper sticker on the way to work had gone quiet. I had tried to rationalize it: stress at work, long-distance fatigue, maybe a midlife phase. But the truth is, she had already left the marriage. I just hadn't noticed. Or maybe I had. And I just didn't want to admit it. I didn't tell anyone that day. Not my CO, not my bunkmate, not my old friend at the base who'd been through 2 divorces and would have had advice ready in seconds. I went to briefing. Took notes. Completed my shift. Ate dinner alone. Came back to my bunk and stared at the wall while the rest of the guys played cards and joked about the Chow Hall's mystery meat. That night, I opened a locked folder on my laptop labeled Archive. Inside were documents Melissa didn't know I had, copies of deeds, insurance policies, screenshots of our financial accounts, notes from when I started sensing something was off. I'm a systems guy. I don't like being caught off guard. She thought she'd taken everything. But she didn't know what I'd already protected. She thought the distance gave her control. That sending one email would end the story. But I don't disappear. I rebuild. And I never come back empty-handed. There's something strange about being blindsided when you thought you were prepared. I'd seen it happen to other guys, back when we were all younger, in our first or second deployments. One guy came back to a house he no longer owned. Another found out his wife had remarried before their divorce was even finalized. I used to think, that won't be me. Melissa and I, we're different. But now, staring at her message, realizing just how deep the deception went, I saw it clearly: I was no different. Not to her. Not anymore. That night I didn't sleep. My body was exhausted, but my mind was sharpening, one piece at a time. I went back through my memories, rewinding the past 6 months like surveillance footage. Her clipped tone. The quick sign-offs. That odd silence when I asked if she'd gone to the beach without telling me. There were always excuses, always distractions. But now I saw them for what they were, exits. Around 3 a.m., I started writing. Not to her. To myself. A list. Timelines. Assets. Everything I still had access to. I remembered that I'd moved a portion of our savings into a private account last year when she started pushing for that joint investment project with her coworker. I hadn't trusted the idea. Turns out, I didn't trust her either, on some level. There was also the safe deposit box in my name only, something my father advised me to set up early in the marriage. I had stashed a few irreplaceable items there, our prenup, which Melissa once laughed off as paranoid, a few key documents, and even a printed record of our financials over the past decade. I didn't expect to need them. But now they felt like body armor. The next day, I called my attorney back in Florida. I didn't tell him everything, just enough. He said, "We'll move quickly. She's likely counting on you being delayed, passive, or emotional. Be none of those." I wasn't planning to be. I also contacted a friend, James, retired Air Force, now working private security in the States. I trusted him with one task: find out where she went. I didn't need to confront her. I needed the facts. Quietly. That evening, I sat through dinner with the rest of the squad. They talked about sports, promotions, flight schedules. I listened, nodded, didn't say a word about the war I was suddenly fighting on a different front. James called 2 days later. He said, "She's not just gone. She's moved in with someone. Guy's name is Eric Wallace. Real estate developer. Mid-50s. Lives in Sarasota." I didn't flinch. I just asked, "How long?" He said, "Records show they've been seeing each other since early spring. Maybe longer." So that was it. Melissa hadn't just ended the marriage. She'd replaced me, before I even knew it was broken. The precision of her exit made sense now. It wasn't just about leaving. It was about ensuring I'd have no time, no leverage, no chance to respond before she started her next life. That night, I didn't feel anger. Not really. What I felt was something colder, deeper, a sense of being carved out of a life I helped build. And knowing that now, the only way forward was through. I looked in the mirror, the overhead light casting a hard edge across my face. 22 years of loyalty. Of birthdays missed, holidays spent in uniform, mortgages paid, surgeries supported. All gone in the space of a few mouse clicks. She thought distance would protect her. That I would stay obedient. Stationed. Delayed by oceans and orders. But I'm a man who lives by strategy. And strategy works best when the enemy thinks you're standing still. She moved first. But I was never planning to play defense. She started the war. Now she gets to find out what it means when I take the gloves off. I didn't say her name for a week. Not to anyone. Not even to myself when I ran through the facts in my head. It was easier that way. Cleaner. Saying it out loud would have made it personal. And right now, I needed everything but emotion. I've learned in the field that emotions can betray you faster than any enemy. The moment you start fighting with your heart instead of your head, you lose. So I stayed quiet. I kept my daily routine intact. Wake at 0500. Run. Cold shower. Briefing. Training. Lunch. Admin time. Dinner. Reports. Lights out. Every hour accounted for. Every breath measured. But under the surface, I was building. My attorney, Mr. Dalton, was moving fast. He'd already filed a formal response to the divorce paperwork, freezing assets where possible. He also started tracing the timeline of Melissa's financial movements. I didn't need revenge. I needed leverage. He said, "Her behavior will matter in court. You being overseas, the joint account closure, moving in with another man, these aren't minor details. They reflect intent." I answered, I don't want to destroy her. But I won't let her erase me either. He said. Good. Stay steady. We'll set the tone. Meanwhile, James kept feeding me small updates. Nothing intrusive, just enough to understand how far Melissa had gone to replace a 22-year marriage. She wasn't hiding. She'd changed her name on social media. Pictures of her and Wallace at wine tastings, beach houses, charity events. There were no signs of hesitation. She was smiling wide, her hand on his chest like the past 2 decades had never happened. I looked at one photo for almost 10 minutes. Not because of what she was doing, but because of what I saw in her face. Peace. Comfort. As if she'd finally found the version of life she actually wanted. And I realized maybe she had. But that didn't make her actions right. It didn't excuse the method. She could have said something. Months ago. She could have asked for a clean break, not a silent ambush. But she didn't. And that said everything I needed to know. I started planning my return home. Not for confrontation. For resolution. The kind that ends quietly, but leaves an echo. The base was supportive. I used accumulated leave and reassignment flexibility to request an early return under personal grounds. It would take a few weeks to process. In the meantime, I focused on finalizing my case. One night, I was walking back from the barracks when I got a call. Unknown number. I picked up. A woman's voice. She said, "Hi. I probably shouldn't be calling. But I thought you should know, Melissa and Eric had a fight. A loud one. The neighbors heard. Police were called. Nothing serious, but she's not as fine as she pretends to be." I didn't ask who she was. I didn't need to. The voice was uncertain, almost guilty. Someone from Melissa's circle who didn't agree with what she'd done. I said, "Thanks for letting me know." She replied, "I just felt wrong not saying anything. You deserve better." I ended the call. I didn't feel satisfaction. Just a strange sort of stillness. Like watching a storm change direction from a distance. You don't celebrate. You just brace for what's next. That night, I opened a folder on my laptop I hadn't touched since the deployment started. It held old photos, anniversaries, holidays, our wedding day. Melissa in her mid-20s, laughing in the Florida sun, a version of her that felt like a memory from someone else's life. I stared at the screen, then selected the folder and moved it to a USB drive. I'd bring it back home. Not because I wanted to relive it, but because I needed to close it properly. I wasn't going to confront her when I landed. I wasn't going to knock on Wallace's door or shout in a driveway. I would arrive. Quietly. Legally. Decisively. She thought I'd come home broken. But I'm coming back sharpened. And the part she never planned for is what happens when a quiet man finally decides to speak. Leaving the base wasn't dramatic. There were no handshakes in the hallway, no salutes with extra meaning. I'd made sure of that. I didn't want anyone asking questions. I filed my leave paperwork quietly, packed my gear, and booked a commercial flight out of Frankfurt. 12 hours later, I was back in Florida. The air felt heavier. Thicker. It always does after Europe. Maybe it was the humidity, maybe something else. Familiarity, maybe. The kind that tightens your chest instead of relaxing it. I didn't go home right away. That house wasn't mine anymore. Not in the emotional sense. Melissa had stripped that from me the moment she walked out without a word. The title might still have both our names on it, but I wasn't walking through that front door like a husband. I was walking in like a witness. Instead, I checked into a long-stay hotel near the highway. Clean, quiet, anonymous. I didn't want to be recognized. I wanted to observe, to plan. The next morning, I met with Mr. Dalton in person. He was exactly the same in real life as on the phone, efficient, professional, unshakable. He slid a folder across the table in a private conference room. He said, "This is everything we've compiled. Transactions, phone records, timelines. You've got a clean path to contest the financial side. The infidelity and account withdrawals are documented. I flipped through the folder. It wasn't just numbers. It was confirmation of everything I'd felt but hadn't been able to prove when I was overseas. He added, "We've drafted a response. If you're ready, we can file this today." I looked up. "I'm ready," he said. "There's one more thing." Her attorney reached out. "She's asking for mediation instead of a full hearing." I didn't flinch. I said, "Let her ask. I'm not here to make things easier." He nodded. "Understood." I spent the next 2 days getting reacquainted with my own life from a distance. I drove by the house. New curtains in the window. Her car was gone. His was there. A black Range Rover with Sarasota plates. I didn't stop. Just looked. I went by our old grocery store. Same parking spots. Same smell in the bakery aisle. Only this time, it felt foreign. Like walking through a version of your own memory, slightly off, like a dream that forgot to end. Then came the letter. Delivered by hand. From Melissa. It was short. Almost lazy in its wording. "Michael, I heard you're back. I didn't expect that so soon. I hope we can do this calmly. There's no need for aggression. I've moved on. You should too." There was no apology. No explanation. Just entitlement disguised as reason. Like I was the one making things complicated now. I didn't respond. 3 days later, my attorney received an offer from hers. Mediation at a neutral office in Tampa. Her side wanted to avoid escalation. That was the phrase they used. I knew what it meant. She was worried. About exposure. About consequences. Dalton said, "We'll go. But we go on our terms." The day of the meeting, I wore civilian clothes. I didn't want to look like a soldier. I wanted to look like a man with options. She arrived with Eric. He sat in the waiting area while she went inside. She barely looked at me. The mediator welcomed us. We sat across a wide table in a glass-walled room. Melissa looked thinner. Nervous. She spoke first. She said, "Michael, I know this isn't ideal. I never wanted things to get hostile." I replied, "You should have thought of that before." She said, "I was unhappy. I didn't know how to say it." I answered, "So you stole and disappeared instead." She looked down. Her lawyer interjected. He said, "Let's stay constructive." Dalton responded, "Constructive would have been transparency. Now we deal with what's on paper." The session lasted 3 hours. Every asset, every account, every point of contention. Melissa tried to push for keeping the house. Tried to minimize the timeline of her relationship with Wallace. But we had records. Dates. Receipts. Surveillance footage from a neighbor showing his car parked overnight weeks before the separation. Her attorney looked paler by the hour. By the end of it, she wasn't speaking. Just nodding. Signing. I didn't feel triumphant. Just steady. Solid. She thought I would cave. That guilt or fatigue or some misplaced sense of loyalty would make me hand her the life she abandoned. But I didn't. I stayed still. Focused. Present. She came to that table expecting mercy. What she found was memory of the man she underestimated. And now she gets to remember it for the rest of her life. After the mediation, I didn't go out to celebrate. There was no relief, no adrenaline high. Just a quiet kind of clarity. The kind that settles in your bones when a storm finally passes, not because it's over, but because you've learned how to stand inside it. I went back to the hotel, poured a glass of water, and sat by the window. From the 5th floor, I could see the highway stretching east, cars slicing through the night, each one carrying someone to a place I no longer called home. Melissa didn't say goodbye when she left the conference room. She just gathered her papers, avoided my eyes, and walked out, her lawyer trailing behind her like a shadow. Eric wasn't waiting for her in the lobby. I noticed that. She got into a rideshare alone. And maybe that was the first time she felt what I had felt 6 months earlier: distance, silence, and the unmistakable weight of consequences. The settlement was leaning in my favor. The house would be sold and the proceeds split, but I'd already secured an agreement for a larger portion based on the financial records we presented. The court acknowledged the hidden withdrawals, the concealed relationship. Everything she tried to deny had been confirmed, line by line, document by document. Dalton said, "You played this exactly right. No aggression, no theatrics. Just control. That's how you win without wreckage." I answered, "It's not about winning. It's about remembering who I am." He nodded. "Then you've done that." But even with the legal momentum, something still lingered. The memories. They crept in during the small hours, quiet scenes, flashes of her smile in a grocery store aisle, the way she used to fold my laundry without asking. That's the part no one warns you about. It's not the betrayal itself. It's the echo of what came before. You can fight a legal battle with facts and files. But fighting memory? That's a slower war. One night, I went to the house. Not to confront her. She wasn't there anymore, hadn't been for weeks. The property was listed, and the realtor had sent me a code for a final inspection. I walked through the rooms like I was stepping through a museum exhibit. Our bed was gone. The kitchen looked smaller without the table. The backyard still had the fire pit I built with my own hands, stone by stone. A few ashes remained, cold and gray. In the living room closet, behind an old box of tangled Christmas lights, I found something I hadn't expected, a shoebox labeled M+M. Inside were photos. Physical ones. Real prints, back when we still used film. Us on our second anniversary in New Orleans. Her birthday at the beach. That blurry shot of me holding a burnt pancake because I forgot to flip it in time. I sat on the floor and looked through every single one. I thought about leaving them. Let the realtor trash them. Let them disappear like everything else. But I didn't. I took the box, closed it gently, and walked out. Outside, the night air smelled like rain. A neighbor I didn't recognize was walking a dog. He glanced at me and nodded. He said, "You moving out?" I answered, "Something like that." He said, "Shame. Nice house." I said nothing. Just got in my car and drove. A week later, the final documents arrived. It was done. No trial. No further mediation. Just a notarized end. I didn't call anyone. Didn't post. Didn't mark the day with drinks or speeches. Instead, I went to a quiet diner off the interstate, ordered black coffee and eggs, and watched the sun rise. It felt symbolic. Maybe it was. Maybe it wasn't. Then my phone rang. Unknown number. I answered. It was her. She said, "Hi. I heard it's all finalized." I said, "It is." She paused. Then said, "You handled it better than I expected." I replied, "You didn't know me as well as you thought." She said, "I guess not." There was silence. Then she said, "I made mistakes. I know that now." I didn't respond. There was nothing to say. She added, "I hope you find peace." I said, "I already did." And I ended the call. She wanted closure. I gave her silence. Because some stories don't end with words, they end with a man walking away, stronger than when he was left behind. The days after finalizing the divorce were strange in their quietness. Not silent, just still. Like a room where someone had been speaking loudly, and now all that remained was the trace of their voice on the walls. I stayed in that long-stay hotel another week. Not because I had to. I just needed time to recalibrate. When a part of your life collapses, the debris doesn't just disappear, it settles in corners, in routines, in empty chairs across from breakfast tables. You have to sweep it out one breath at a time. I spent those mornings walking. No phone, no distractions. Just me and a stretch of pavement. I didn't think about Melissa. I didn't think about Wallace. I thought about small things. The way the air smelled near the Gulf. The way my boots sounded on cracked sidewalks. The way time moves when you finally stop chasing it. One afternoon, I drove to a lake about 30 miles north of the city. My dad used to bring me there as a kid to fish. The dock was still there, aged, bowed, but standing. I sat at the edge with my feet dangling over the water, listening to the soft creak of old wood under my weight. That night, I opened the shoebox again, the one labeled M+M. I went through each photo slowly. This time, I didn't feel anger. I didn't feel betrayal. I felt distance. Like watching someone else's life through a fogged window. I put the photos back in the box and wrote something on the lid with a pen I found in the drawer. Done. Then I taped it shut. The next day, I bought a fire-safe container, locked it, and put the box inside. Not because I wanted to save it, but because there's power in knowing something no longer holds power over you. Dalton called later that week. He said, "Paperwork's been finalized by the court. It's done on all fronts." I answered, "Appreciate everything." He said, "You kept your dignity. That matters more than most people realize." I said, "That's the only thing that mattered." Then I called the base. Told them I was ready for reassignment. Something different. Somewhere new. I didn't want to go back to the same desk, the same rotation, the same rhythm that once made sense. I needed change. They offered me a post in Colorado. Logistics operations. Stable, strategic, no deployments for the first year. I said yes without hesitation. Before I left, I met with James for coffee. We hadn't seen each other since he first gave me the intel on Wallace. He walked in wearing his usual faded ball cap and flannel, like no time had passed. He said, "You look better." I answered, "Feel better." He said, "So what's next?" I smiled. "Elevation. Literally and metaphorically." He laughed. Then got serious. He said, "Proud of you, man. You kept your hands clean. That takes strength." I said, "She underestimated me." So did I. The move to Colorado was seamless. A furnished apartment, view of the mountains, crisp air that felt like reset with every inhale. I started running again. Reading again. Breathing like a man not weighed down by memory. Then, about a month in, I got another letter. No return address. No handwriting on the envelope. Just typed text inside. "Michael, I saw a photo of you in Colorado. Someone sent it to me. You look good. Healthy. Strong. I don't know what I expected. Maybe I thought you'd be different. Maybe I thought I'd matter longer than I did. Take care. I folded the letter, placed it in the same fire-safe box as the photos, and shut the lid. I didn't need to respond. Because I already had, with how I lived. She left thinking I'd unravel. But I didn't. I rebuilt in silence, brick by steady brick. And now she watches from the past, while I rise without her name in my mouth. The first snow came early that year in Colorado. Thin at first, like powder brushed across the ridge, but by morning it covered the rooftops and quieted everything. There's a certain peace in snow. It softens edges. Slows noise. Reminds you that endings can be clean. I stood by the window of my apartment, coffee in hand, watching the flakes fall. No rush to be anywhere. No voice in the other room. Just silence, and not the kind that feels like absence. The kind that feels earned. Life had become simpler. I'd settled into the new post. Logistics ops suited me. Clear expectations, focused work, no drama. My colleagues were sharp, professional. No one asked questions about my personal life, and I didn't offer answers. I didn't need to explain where I'd been. I only needed to show where I was now. Some weekends I hiked. Alone, mostly. Just me and the mountain trails, the crisp air, and the steady rhythm of my boots. I found I liked the solitude. It didn't feel empty, it felt honest. No performance, no pretending. Just breath and distance. One Saturday I ran into someone from the old days. Not military, civilian. A man named Carl who used to work in procurement back in Florida. He recognized me instantly. He said, "Mike? Damn, I didn't expect to see you out here." I replied, "Moved a few months ago. Needed altitude." He laughed. "Well, whatever you're doing, it's working. You look like you dropped 10 years. I smiled. "Maybe I did," he asked cautiously. "So, you and Melissa?" I said, "That chapter's closed." He nodded. "Heard she's not doing too hot. Friend of mine said she and that guy split up. Messy." I didn't react. "Didn't need to," he said. "Sorry, man. That whole thing was rough." I answered, "It was necessary." That night I thought about what he said. About her. About Wallace. About all of it. Not with bitterness. Just clarity. She left when I was thousands of miles away. Took what she wanted. Thought I'd fade. Thought I'd break. Thought the man she built a life with would stay buried in deployment and silence. But I didn't break. I adapted. That's the part she never understood. Loyalty doesn't make you weak. It makes you patient. And when you stop giving it to the wrong person, what's left is unshakable. A few weeks later, I boxed up the last of the items from Florida. Things I'd stored away, unsure if I'd ever want to see again. Uniform pins. A faded notebook. An old mug with our wedding date on it. I held the mug for a moment. Looked at the inscription. Then I dropped it into the trash. Not out of spite. Out of release. Because sometimes the most powerful thing a man can do is walk away without leaving a mark. Now I wake up before dawn not because I'm on alert, but because I want to catch the sunrise. I train because I enjoy it, not because I'm preparing for another war. I drink my coffee in silence, not because no one's there, but because peace deserves its own space. There are no more court dates. No more emails. No more voices asking me to let go. I already did. And if she thinks of me, if she lies awake at night wondering what I'm doing, if she scrolls through my old profiles looking for signs, I hope she sees it. Not revenge. But something quieter. A man she didn't destroy. A man she set free. Subscribe if you want more stories about real men who don't shout. They act. Coldly? To the end?